He is a boxing writer, TV personality, historian, and current editor-in-chief of The Ring Magazine and RingTV.com. Please welcome boxing aficionado Doug Fischer.
Welcome to Title Unboxed. With more than 40 years of experience in the fight game, our host, Doug Ward, will be covering every corner of the ring as we get comfortable between the ropes. We'll talk with both the lesser knowns and the legends, discuss boxing's rich history and current state of the game. We'll also look at today's latest innovations, equipment breakdowns, and insights you won't uncover anywhere else. Join us now as we take a look inside Title Unboxed.
Doug, thank you for joining us on Title Unboxed.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So the first burning question I have is your name. You went by Dougie in the beginning.
Yeah.
Your Instagram is Douglas.
Yeah.
Doug, what do you go by?
I think I go by I go by Doug. I seldom go by Douglas. And early when I first started writing freelance articles, like in the early 90s, mid 90s, yeah. I would put Douglas, full name, because it just sounded a little more formal, a little more serious. Yeah. Put a little more respect on it.
Yeah.
Like that sounds like respectable, mature professional, right? Douglas M. Fischer. I'd have my middle initial in there. Yeah. And I stopped doing that, by the late 90s. So everybody knows me as Doug, and my friends will call me Dougie. And I notice older folks, so anybody like my age group or older, they call me Dougie. Yeah. And then younger, it's Doug.
So what do they write on your cup at Starbucks though?
Doug.
Doug. Okay. Yeah. I get dog. I get Doug spelled D-U-G.
I get dough. I get dough.
I get that all the time too. It's like
dough.
I thought Doug was a common name, but I guess not.
Yeah, I do. I do get that at Starbucks. Yeah, I've gotten dog at Starbucks.
So I want to talk about your start in boxing. You started out as a writer, of course, and you were Dougie back then, right? And did you start? How did you get your first break into the game?
Well, I was in the world of journalism. I went to school for journalism, undergraduate at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. Okay. And that was 88 to 92. And it was just, general media communications. But by the end, maybe by my senior year, I had focused a lot towards print media and journalism, right? So news writing. And I applied to journalism grad schools. And really, to my surprise, I was accepted at Columbia University. Yeah. So, I honestly, I got to tell you, I was burnt out. I was really? Antioch was a real small college. I mean, really small. Like seldom more than 300 students on the campus at one time, right? It's a little bit of a bigger student body than that, but they had an internship program, what they called a cooperative education, their co-op program. So close to half of the student body was off doing internships off campus during the year, and it would they would switch back and forth. You weren't allowed to stay on campus like say 3 straight quarters. So it was like every other quarter, or you would study on campus for 2 quarters, and then you'd be gone for a quarter or 2, and then return to the campus. And I liked it. That actually attracted me to the college, because I didn't know if I was college material. I didn't know if I had the discipline or just really the desire to continue school. And when you're young, when you're a teenager, you think, your high school experience is going to be the same. And in college, I was silly enough to think more of this, 4 more years of this, right? And I remember thinking the same thing. And when I was in junior high, I hate school. High school's really going to suck. It's going to be 4 years of this. And it wasn't. It was different. Yeah. It was an improvement. But I don't know. I didn't make good grades. I wasn't a good student. So there was a lot of just school and me. It was a stressful relationship. Even when I liked my subjects and I liked my teachers, I was probably ADD, Yeah. Everybody nowadays is diagnosed AD&D. Nobody was doing that in the 80s. Right. Just like if you couldn't pay attention, you needed to straighten up. You needed to get your act together. So my parents, both teachers, both college
really?
educated, both grad school educated. Their parents were also educators, teachers,
Yeah.
college educated, obviously. So it was a generational kind of thing. And it seemed like, my parents were really good students. I know my mother skipped grades, and my dad and his parents, always would remark that just he never really studied. He's just one of those folks that school was easy.
Yeah.
He didn't have to prepare that much for the tests. He would whip out homework really quickly.
So were
And I noticed
they just shaking their heads at you, going, "How did this happen?"
right, everybody, yeah. So it seemed like it to me. Everybody made good grades.
Yeah.
That's how it was with my parents and their grandparents, and that's how it was with my siblings. So, I was kind of the odd man out in that I struggled. I had very mediocre grades, and I would always have some, strong grades and stuff that I was interested in, like English and history. Sometimes I was into social studies or whatever. But I didn't do as well in those classes as I could have, just because, I fall asleep in class, or I didn't do my homework and that kind of stuff. And I generally test well. If I would prepare for a test, I would test well. So it wasn't like college was out of the question, because I could do well on SAT scores and ACT scores. If I really buckled down and focus, okay, I'm going to do this, but personally, I didn't want to do that. It was a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And this college in Yellow Springs, Ohio, they were kind of a progressive liberal arts education, and they didn't do grades. They didn't do letter grades.
Right.
I was like, kind of like that. And on top of that, they're like, you're never on campus for that long. They say, hey, if these Ohio winters are too harsh for you, and they weren't. I had grown up in Columbus, Ohio, and we get snow. We have winters in Missouri.
You used to it, yeah.
Yeah. So from 5th grade through high school, my family was in Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's not far from us.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I was used to cold weather and all, but they said that. I remember during admissions and all, and being a prospective student there, they said you could get an internship in a warmer part of the country, or whatever city or region of America, or even the world that you've never been to and you want to check out. We have connections, we have jobs that we can hook you up with there, and you'll get college credit for it. And if they pay money, you can make some money and save money and that kind of thing. And I was like, all right, that sounds kind of cool. I'm getting some like real world experience while I'm in school. So I went for that, and immediately fell in love with the media professors, the heads of the communications department. They were gregarious. And they were they were like super into what they were doing.
Right.
So, even if you were super ADD like me, like you didn't dare fall asleep in their class. You couldn't fall asleep in their class because they were just so dynamic and into it. And, a lot of the classes you get up and leave, and, whatever you work on, whatever, producing videos and stuff like that. And, a lot of field trips and all that kind of stuff. So I got into that, and lo and behold, I after Antioch, I was accepted to Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism.
Yeah.
And that was a grind. That was tough. But I graduated, so I had a master's degree from an Ivy League university.
There you go.
In journalism. So, I was like, I went with the print. The journalism school is split between a broadcast and print schools.
Yeah.
And I went with print because it seemed like the assholes all went to broadcasting. Like everyone who got on my nerves, they were headed towards TV.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really into that. I wasn't like, oh, I want to be on camera, I want to be famous kind of thing. I'd like to write, I like to meet people, and I like to talk. I'm very chatty. And I was that, and people talk to me easily. Like I was always that guy, before, people's phones had everything, and people would ride a plane. A lot of times you get to know somebody sitting next to you.
Sure.
And I was always that person the person sitting next to me would tell their life stories to. Their entire, and they'd be like, I can't believe I'm telling you all of this. You just, and sometimes I wouldn't want to talk, but I'm too nice. Sometimes I want to sleep or I want to read a book or whatever, or I'm not that interested in their life story. But didn't matter who it was, didn't matter their background. People would open up to me. Half the time, they give me their information, hey, if you're ever in Minnesota, come by. This has been a great talking to you. Oh, what's your name? I know their name, but they know nothing of me. I haven't said a word. I'm just like nodding. But I would ask a few questions like, oh, so then what happened? Or what did you do from there? Well, funny story. And they keep going and all. So, but I do enjoy that. I enjoy that. I enjoy that discourse.
But you're more comfortable behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am too.
And then I enjoy telling the story, the retelling, like knowing something about somebody or knowing somebody's story, and then having that responsibility to share that with a much wider audience, and recording it and chronicling it, like that's like being that sort of custodian of people's history. Like that, like I took that seriously. So I like that. And so the print school was for me. And in my mind, I was like, with this degree and this experience that I've gotten here, in New York City, which is an incredible lab for journalism, for just going out, and the whole world is there, right? It's an international city. The UN is there. I actually sat in UN sessions, as part of my education at Columbia. You meet everybody, you talk to everybody, you write every conceivable type of article. So I had a little bit of experience along with this, degree, Ivy League. And I figured I can go anywhere in the country, maybe the world, anywhere where there's a medium-sized to major daily newspaper or even a weekly. I can go. They would be happy to have me, and I can settle in anywhere in the country. And I was thinking it was going to be like that forever because I thought newspapers were going to stick around. And little did I know, I graduated in 93. Little did I know, like within 7 years, the newspaper industry was on very shaky legs.
Crazy. And
there was a digital revolution that was going to come about and really, cripple newspapers and magazines in a way that the publishing industry had never experienced before and has not recovered from. So much has changed. When I moved to Los Angeles, and that was in October of 1993, there were more newsstands than you could count. There were newsstands, outdoor newsstands everywhere, and they all had boxing match. I could find the sports section and then find boxing.
Yep.
And I could, on a given weekend, I could drop $50 or $60 just on boxing magazines from around the world.
Yeah.
And have like a stack of reading material, a heavy stack of reading material, which I would consume in a matter of days and then couldn't wait for, next month.
Yeah, right.
The next score. But they were staggered. So where I could go every week and, on one week or, one day of the week, pick up Ring Magazine and Boxing Monthly and Boxing Scene and Boxing Illustrated. And then on another week, you pick up, the Ring's sister titles, KO, World Boxing and Boxing 95.
Classics.
And, and like little newsletters, the boxing, I forgot what they called it, the Bulletin or the Flash.
Yeah. Both. I think both those came from the UK. Weren't those out of the UK?
There was one. Yeah. There was one.
Boxing Update was one of them.
Yeah. But there was one that was also, I think, published out of Nevada, and it was a weekly.
It was out of Reno, Rusty?
There was Rusty's. Yeah,
I can't remember the name of it, but
I got them all. There was these brothers, these twins. They had an Italian last name, like Rinaldi or something. They had like a boxing newspaper, like a newsletter. Yeah. It wasn't the best quality. I didn't care. I had no standards. Is it boxing? Is it in print? Give it to me.
I know.
You know,
Words on the paper. I've got it.
I was insatiable like that. And then, by 99, they, half of them were gone. And half of the magazines were gone.
Yeah.
And so I saw this. I saw the writing on the wall, and I was really lucky because I was one of these guys that was, in terms of technology, I was always really hesitant. Like in grad school, I was like the last student to get email. And it was mandatory. You had to do it so your teachers could communicate with you.
Right.
And I was like, nah, I don't do electric mail. No, not me. And they're like, yes, you have to get it now. I'm like, okay.
This is the new way. Yep.
Yeah, right.
Well, even in the beginning,
even the people to get a cell phone. I didn't want to be bugged. I'm like, Doug, you have to have a cell phone. I'm like, why do I have to have a cell phone? We've survived as a society this long without everybody having a mobile phone. Why do I have to get one? Get a cell phone. Everybody's like, get a cell phone. And that's,
I remember when
social media too, I was like so hesitant to get on it. Now it's like, oh, it's such a big. Well,
I remember when Fight News started to get big and some of those other digital platforms, the print writers hated it. They were like, these are not real writers. These guys are just taking the easy route. It was really a big pushback from it. Now it's where everything's at. It's just crazy how that's evolved.
Exactly. So I probably would have been one of those professional snobs.
Yeah.
Because from, since 93, I'd been working as either a professional journalist, a general assignment reporter, or as a copy editor.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, if I'm looking at Fight News or one of those early websites, I'm noticing there's no writing here. It's just straight information. And B, I'm noticing typos and grammatical errors and stuff.
Yeah,
and
it was pretty random.
Whatever. I can say not that I don't make those same mistakes. They're invisible to me, but I see them in other people's writing.
Of course.
But I probably would have been one of those snobs. But I was working out at a boxing gym called the LA Boxing Club.
Oh, really?
There was a guy who was being trained by my trainer named Gary Randall, who was one of these wizards, technical wizards. We called them webmasters. And they just learned the HTML code. They knew the code and they could put it up there. You don't need to know code now to put up a website. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's programs and apps and whatever that just do it for you. But in, 1995, it was like a small group of people who had like this programming education or knowledge, whatever. Yeah. And he was one of them. And he had put up his own sort of boxing fan sites, one of which was taken down by the legal department, I think from HBO or Showtime, because he was taking clips of pay-per-view fights, like Tyson Holyfield. And just little clips and putting them up, like, oh, I can't believe what a great fight that was this weekend. And here's a clip, he put a clip up there and he would create these little GIF animations from the video that he would record and digitize.
Wow.
And this is, he was doing this at a time when, everybody was still on a dial-up. There wasn't a lot of high speed. So most people, they would go to his website and their browser experience or their computer or laptop, it wasn't even strong enough to take in the full experience of his websites because they were so heavy with like, not just the photos, the graphics, but there was animations taking place on the page that took forever to load.
Right.
And he would have little QuickTime videos. And even if they were 30 seconds, you would hit play on there and on a dial, you'd have to sit there and wait, for 5 minutes for it to load and then play, whatever, Tyson knocking down Holyfield or Holyfield knocking down Tyson, actually.
Yeah. So that was your introduction into boxing? You were working out at a boxing gym at LA Fitness? And that was... Yeah,
I had done some freelance stories. Not LA Fitness. I hated LA Fitness.
Oh, really?
LA Boxing Club.
LA Boxing Club. Okay.
LA Boxing Club. Yeah. I started there in 94 and 95. And I was training with a teenager who came from a fighting family, the Navarros. So you know Jose Navarro, who made the 2000 Olympic team.
Yep.
Maybe you're familiar with Carlos Navarro, who was a top amateur.
Yep.
People thought he was going to make the 96 team, as a matter of fact.
I remember.
He was like a peer of Floyd Mayweather. They were both kicking butt in the same divisions. But Carlos, when he stepped up from 119 to 125, not quite the same.
Right.
Not quite the same.
Right.
And I think Mayweather got him at 125.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mayweather beat Augie Sanchez. Sanchez beat Floyd, and then Floyd came back and beat Sanchez twice to get on the team, get on the 1996 team. Yeah. Yep. But this guy was aiming. This was the brother of Carlos and Jose, Ignacio. Everybody called him Nacho.
Uh-huh.
And he was good. He was the one Navarro brother who wasn't a southpaw. He had a lot of power. He had a victory. He had beaten Fernando Vargas in a fight, when Vargas was a lot lighter, like lightweight or so. And he was also training folks. And so I had him train me. He said, well, I really don't have time to train, personal training, because I'm actually going to try to make the 96 Olympic team. I got to win like a major tournament, and I said, hey, that's cool. You don't have to be hands-on with me. I'd learned a little. I mean, I had a foundation in boxing, because when I was at Columbia, I would go to Gleason's gym, and a guy named Martin Snow taught me the basics. And the great thing about Martin is Martin did a lot of personal training. And when he would have like a client that paid a lot of money, because he had they were like mafia dudes that wanted to be macho, whatever. Sammy the Bull Gravano or whatever, they would hire boxing instructors, or they would train kind of in private or whatever. And Snow was kind of a visionary in like boxing fitness, kind of like how Billy Blanks did with the Taibo or whatever. He had classes like that were really geared towards young women in college, just staying in shape, but getting a little bit of self-defense skills as well. So sometimes he would have those type of classes, and when he couldn't train me, the substitute trainer was Carlos Ortiz, an all-time great former lightweight champ, Puerto Rican great, who doesn't get enough credit. So that was always awesome. So it was either Martin Snow teaching me the foundation, or it was this old man who was a great fighter, and I knew about it, who would just kind of take me to the exercises. And that was at Gleason's gym. So I had a foundation.
Okay. So how'd you end up moving from New York to LA?
All right. So I was in New York City studying journalism at Columbia University. And I graduated, and I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go in the country. I had options. And again, I chose the print side of the journalism grad school because I figured it would give me the freedom to move to any state in the union, or any major city, because every major city had at least a mid-sized daily newspaper. So I had those kind of skills. Didn't have a whole lot of experience though. So I took an internship in Massachusetts. I moved in with an undergrad college friend of mine who was living in Cambridge. And I was working for a newspaper called the Patriot Ledger in Quincy, Massachusetts. So, a short commute, maybe half-hour commute outside of the Boston area to this nice town. And cut my teeth just doing daily news, general assignment news writing for about 3 or 4 months until the internship was up.
It's interesting because all this you've gone through, all this background, all of this, all the internships and all the work you put in, paying your dues. People don't see that. They see you come out of nowhere and suddenly you're on TV doing boxing events, or writing for Ring Magazine or the big boys. Right.
And it starts with school. It starts with finding your passion while in college. If you have a knack for something. I was told I had a knack for news writing or just for writing, period, which is interesting because the only type of writing that I was really interested in was like creative writing. you know what I mean? Or script writing or whatever. I didn't want to be a beat reporter for anything. Even sports. And I wasn't much of a sports fan outside of boxing. But it's good to have that foundation wherever you go. And that's what they told me while I was attending Columbia, is that if you get the discipline of being a daily general assignment, daily newspaper writer, you could write about anything.
Because that's a grind, right?
Yeah, it's a total grind.
You got to turn and burn.
You got to do something every day. You got to work the phones. You got to get out there, your area. You have to find the stories. Sometimes they come to you. Sometimes on a slow day, you've got to get out there. But one day it's like politics, local politics, city council type thing. Out in Massachusetts, it was they called them the selectmen's meetings or whatever. Very boring. Or school board meetings, very boring. Yeah. They were not as boring once I came to the West Coast, and I was covering Compton city politics. That wasn't boring at all. People would go at it. But just writing about everyday things, meeting different people, whether they're, they were people who worked for the city or people who owned businesses or, whatever, people who were the victims of crimes or whatever you were assigned that particular day, you kind of had to become an expert in it. You had to do your research, once you go out there and do the interview, a little bit before you do the interview, definitely after the interview to make sure you get everything right. You got to make the follow-up calls. You got to make sure that you're, what you're writing is correct as it can be. But the main thing is just the discipline of writing every day. You know what I mean? It's like, I think Stephen King has a quote where he says, writing is like push-ups. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Yeah. The more you do it, the more you can do. I don't know how many books Stephen King has written.
Well, he does. I saw him do an interview with the guy that did the R.R. Martin, the guy that did the Game of Thrones. Is that it? Who?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know the name, but
I saw him do an interview with him, and they were talking about how do you write, and he says, "Well, I'm just disciplined. I do 6 pages a day, no matter what."
Right, and that's a great way to approach it, and they were right. It's a good foundation. They said the only catch is if you remain a newspaper writer for a number of years, you can get locked in that style. Yeah. That old newspaper style of very short sentences, very concise. Because back then you were limited to page space.
Right.
So, your editor gives you a word count or says, don't give me more than 2 screens worth on your computer, whatever. Everyone has a system, no more than 8 graphs, right? Yeah. Or whatever, or just the number of words. You were limited with newspapers, and you would write, you write your story. If you had to write kind of long, you would write it in a way that maybe the last 2 or 3 paragraphs could get cut from the story if need be. If a bigger story came in and they needed to make room for it, okay, let's cut the last couple of paragraphs off of Doug's story here because he's just writing about, the opening of a new library. So you keep all your good stuff, the meat at the beginning, right?
Right.
And you can get caught, you can get stuck in that format,
that style,
that formula. Right. So they said,
it's interesting because that goes back to the digital thing, how freeing that must have been.
Oh,
to be able
totally.
to just write for
my gosh.
Max Boxing, and you just write until you're done.
In so many, in many different ways, right? So, I cut my teeth. I got it. I did. I got the daily newspaper grind under my belt. I didn't like it, but I could do it. And the people at the Patriot Ledger, they liked me. They said, "Hey, you could work here." I think they knew I kind of had aspirations to work at the Boston Globe because that was one of the big newspapers of that area. Sure. And I'd done an internship there while as an undergrad at Antioch College. But as soon as it got cold, I was like, wait, that's right. I hate these winters. And the
Yeah.
previous winter, there was a blizzard. The previous winter that hit New York City, I remember telling myself, this is it, man.
Yeah.
I got to get out of here, man.
Yeah.
I can't stand this. And
You got to be built
so
for
I
that.
had family. Yeah, I had family in the Los Angeles area, and I'd done an internship. One of my first internships was in the Bay Area, and I loved it. I was there in the summer, and I was just bouncing around Berkeley and San Francisco and Oakland. This is like the summer of '89 or '90 or whatever, and I'm like, man, I wouldn't mind living here. You know,
Yeah.
it was so different, and the weather was beautiful.
Right.
And it was very diverse, and there was a different energy, energy very different from East Coast cities, which is what I was used to. Definitely different than Midwest cities. And I was naive enough to think that LA was like just like the Bay Area or whatever. But I had family in LA that said I could come and stay with them, and so I sent my resume out west. And this weekly newspaper called Wave Newspapers that basically served the community that had been ransacked by the 1992 riots.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Still kind of rebuilding, but they said, hey, come on in. We'll give you like a 2-week trial. And if you're up to snuff, then stay on, we'll give you a job. So I did that. And I drove from Cambridge, Massachusetts, across the country. I had made a stop in Columbus, Ohio, where my mother was living at the time, and gathered some stuff, and then down to Springfield, Missouri, where the family home was and all of my stuff was, and packed my car up and then drove out. I think I had a stop in Tucumcari, New Mexico, and then in Tucson, Arizona, where my grandparents on my dad's side were. I spent the night there. And
it's a trek
from Tucson, Arizona to LA.
Yeah.
And it was like a week. It took me a week to go from one side of the country to the other. And the entire time, so I'm like 23 years old. I just, I was 23, maybe 23 and a half. And you got all these doubts, it's just me in a car, either listening to my tapes or just talking to myself.
Yeah.
Saying, you know what you're doing? Like I had never met this family that I was going to stay with in Venice.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if I was going to get the job. It wasn't promised to me. I was trying out. And I was like, well, what do I do if I don't get the job? And I was like, well, whatever. I'll try to get a job with the LA Times or, some other newspaper in the area. I got a degree from Columbia.
Sure.
But at the same time, I didn't have a lot of experience. I just had that internship and maybe an extra month or two with the Patriot Ledger. So you have to fight these doubts as you're going cross country, hour by hour, day by day. And I remember when I first was driving in to Los Angeles, it just looked like this ominous megalopolis. I was like, oh my God, this isn't like the Bay Area at all. It was intimidating, and the traffic, unlike anything I'd ever seen. Now, I was used to driving in traffic because of the Boston area. Boston traffic's awful, and Boston drivers are they can be antagonistic. They're quickly agitated. They're high strung out there.
Yeah.
But this was different. This was just like a mess of cars and these these multi-lane highways, and it was intimidating. I was like, holy crap. What have I gotten myself into? How long am I going to last out here? But like you were saying, you need those experiences. You need to have, if you don't have the educational foundation, you need to get that experience. Okay. Yeah. And life experience is just as important to journalism as the journalistic experience, the writing experience, the reporting experience, the editing process, all of that. And so I did that, and I worked for Wave Newspapers for about a year and a half. Did not like the amount of pay. It was like nothing. I was making about as much as a substitute teacher would make in a year.
Right, especially in LA.
Yeah.
With the cost of living out there.
Right. Yeah. And at some point I wanted to move, I wanted to move out from I was staying with family, like a great aunt and uncle. Yeah. And, luckily they were beautiful, but the area of Venice that they lived in was rough. There was a lot of gang violence at the time,
Yeah.
a lot of drug wars. Basically, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And it was a hot spot for gang violence, and very unpleasant. And I certainly didn't want to get hit by a stray bullet. So as soon as I could, I moved to Culver City and like a small studio. I don't even think it didn't have a kitchen. Yeah, it was just like a bedroom, a bathroom, and a closet. And I don't know, maybe I had a hot plate or something like that, and a microwave, and one of those little refrigerators, like it's like a box. And it wasn't that expensive, maybe $300 a month or something, which was pretty good for LA. Yeah. But I wanted more than that. I wanted a kitchen. I wanted to live in a nicer area or whatever. So I got into editing. I got a job working for a legal trade publication, and I did some writing, very boring writing. Especially compared to being on the beat in South Central Los Angeles, in Compton. But it was a 9-to-5 job where I had an office, and I had medical benefits and profit sharing and a 401k and all that stuff you don't really care about when you're 23, 24, 25 years old. You really don't.
Yeah, all the security stuff.
Yeah. But what that did was, having a 9-to-5 job, and it was out in the Valley. That's the only time I worked, was 9 to 5. I didn't take my job home with me or anything. I was mainly an editor, and I was laying out, I was doing the design, or helping with the design for this publication. And I needed an outlet after work, and that was boxing. I found the LA Boxing Club in downtown Los Angeles.
Is that where
every day after work I would drive there?
Is that where Bill Slayton and Lehman Brewster worked out of?
No, Bill Slayton, who I got to know, and Lehman, who I got to know, wonderful guy. Both of them were, may he rest in peace. Slayton was described to me by a cut man named Tony Rivera. Tony always referred to Bill Slayton as the last of the great trainers.
That guy.
He was the old head.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys I wanted to talk to. He was one of those guys I wanted to meet at these boxing gyms out here.
Yeah.
And pick their brains and just ask them one question and let them talk and just soak it all in. And I did that. He did train at the LA Boxing Club, but he had a celebrity client who met him there, and that was Sean Penn's brother, who's also passed away, Chris Penn.
Oh yeah.
Chris Penn loved boxing. I think Chris wanted to box.
Oh, really?
And Bill trained him, but Bill worked with Lehman Brewster at his gym, which was the Broadway gym, which is in Watts, which is one of the older gyms in a rough area. And I used to go there because I had heard that a lot of the old heads would congregate there, because I had heard that Ike Williams, before he died, he would go there. I heard Ray Robinson, before he died, he would go there. So either there or the Main Street gym, but the Main Street gym was gone. It had closed up. And in fact, the LA Boxing Club took its spot. The LA Boxing Club was built in the same area, the same building that the last incarnation of the mainstream boxing gym was. So I hit these places. And I remember reading in Ring magazine before I moved out to Los Angeles that Ike Williams and Ray Robinson were in that area, and Archie Moore was in San Diego. And I remember thinking, man, if I could get there, not only could I go to the fights, because I knew it had a rich boxing, fight scene and history. Basically, it's a fight town. But also I knew that these great fighters were still alive, and they would go to the gyms and, or go to the club shows, and I'd be able to meet them and talk to them. And unfortunately, Robinson and Williams died before I got out here. But I was able to talk to fighters who fought Robinson. There was a guy he used to go by most of the gyms, but he would hang out mostly at LA Boxing Club. And his name was Ray Barnes. And Barnes fought, Robinson, I don't know, in like 49 or 1950, kind of like Robinson's peak, right when he moved to the middleweight division and had some insane record, like, 130 and 1 and
Crazy.
2 loss, 2 draws. Yeah. It's like something
crazy.
like that. Insane. And he fought him like that version of Ray Robinson, this guy. And I met guys that had fought, Ezra Charles and guys that had shared the ring with Willie Pep or Henry Armstrong or Archie Moore. I was able to meet Archie Moore and talk to him a little bit. Who was the guy? This guy might still be alive. Ray Barnes died years ago, but there's a guy out here named Paul Andrews who was managed by Joe Louis and briefly trained by Joe Louis.
Oh, wow.
And he fought guys like Ezra Charles and Harold Johnson. He was a top-rated light heavyweight contender in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. And I would listen to these guys and just let them talk about that golden age. And then there were fighters, amazing fighters that were the top fighters of the 60s, 70s, and 80s who were around, and they were at the gyms. So for a young journalist, it was great. But just being a young man, it was great to get to the gym after sitting, with a tie, a dress shirt and a tie all day, just doing this, editing other people's work, going blind, to just get in my car. And it was a long drive just because of the traffic, the rush hour traffic. But I would probably be in my car, which at the time didn't even have an air conditioner, and it was hot during the summers. Yeah, but like an hour and a half from like the Canoga Park area or the Chatsworth area to downtown LA to work out at the LA Boxing Club. And it was great just to let loose. And you get to know everybody, and it becomes your like a social club.
What a great way to really gain an appreciation for the sport, to, sit down with those guys that have that knowledge that, they take with them, and to see that perspective and get their feel of the sport, and then, comparing it to today's fighters and, what's going on in today's game.
Right. So it was generational. Yeah. You had the old heads, some of whom were still training. Otherwise, they were just sitting out and, talking about the old days or watching the young guys. Yeah. And then you had, fighters who were more recently retired, who were names during the 80s or whatever. And then you had the current pros, and, it was established veterans like, John David Jackson and Reggie Johnson. Yep. I saw them a lot. And up and comers like Shane Mosley, and current world champions like Gennaro Hernandez, and they're all there. And I'm watching a lot of these guys spar. I'm watching Gennaro Hernandez and Shane Mosley and Hector Lopez and David Kamau and all these folks that I was watching on TV. Yeah. Actually at the time when I first got there, Shane wasn't fighting on TV. He was fighting in club fights. Wow. But I knew he would be on TV. And in fact, Shane was the subject of my first major feature story published in Ring Magazine.
Oh, wow.
Shane, yeah. And it was
I probably read it.
Yeah. I think it came out in like 97. But I was pitching Steve Farhood, who was editor-in-chief at the time. Yeah. I was pitching him on Shane going back to 95. Oh, wow. Because I would go to the shows that Shane fought on, and he'd blow these dudes out. He was fighting journeymen. Sure. Tough journeyman, like Tijuana journeyman. Yeah. And, legit guys. That's what I tried to argue to Steve. Steve's like, no, we don't know how good he is. He's got to step up, or he's got to get a major promoter, and let me know, or I'll let you know when it's time for a Shane Mosley story. And as soon as he signed like a co-promotional deal with Cedric Kushner and brought Tom Loeffler on as manager, and got his title shot against IBF lightweight champ Philip Holliday from South Africa. Mm-hmm. Then they said, okay, Doug, now it's time. Okay. and we'll find out. We'll find out if he's really the goods, Yeah. So I got to write that story, but I knew he was the goods from watching him in the gym. I knew it. Yeah. So it's a great
some guys just have it,
And you know what? Below the guys who were like up and comers, hot prospects like Shane, there were amateur fighters. Like the Navarro brothers. So there was Carlos Navarro, who was trying to make the 1996 Olympic team. And his younger brother, Jose, who did make the 2000 Olympic team, probably should have been a world champion at 115 pounds, but he got robbed in his first title shot in Japan. And then there was a middle child named Ignacio. Everyone called him Nacho. And he's the first guy to train me at the LA Boxing Club. And
do you remember your first writing gig for boxing that was boxing oriented? You probably started out freelance, right?
Well, the Wave had a sports writer and had sports pages and this guy couldn't stand boxing, so he never wrote about it. So I told him I'll do it. And which made no sense to me because there were fights happening, at the Forum like twice a week or something like that. It was happening like all the time, or maybe not twice a week, but every week, or at least 3 times a month. Forum Boxing was doing shows in the jurisdiction of Wave newspapers, and this dude would never go, and I was going as a fan and watching Juan Manuel Marquez and Marco Antonio Barrera and Mark Sharp Johnson and Chiquita Gonzalez. And these guys were there was sometimes for some of these fights, there was like 10,000 plus fans. I mean, they were big events. And this guy had no interest, and I used to beg him, let me go so I can get a credential, so I don't have to pay to get in there. But I'll write up a report. And he shined me off, and so finally, the competing newspaper for that community was the Los Angeles Sentinel, and it's one of the oldest African American newspapers. And I got hired on as a stringer by their editor. I probably 95, 96, 1995, 96, I covered some shows like at the Olympic, and I remember there was a show in Culver City, just a club show. Actually Antonio Margarito was in the main event. And I didn't realize he was like 18 years old at the time, and he lost to a guy named Rodney Jones. And I'm thinking, well, Rodney Jones is going to go on and become a champion, and I'll never see this Margarito guy again. Boxing.
That is. Some guys bounce back, some don't.
Yeah. So I had no idea he was a teenager, though.
Yeah. So how'd you make the segue from there to what was your next step? Max Boxing, House of Boxing, Ring Magazine? Did you do freelance for all of them, or were you focusing on one at the beginning?
I freelanced in the mid 90s. I was a stringer. I did stringer work for the newspapers. And I did freelance work for the fight programs before I started doing stuff for the Ring. So at this time, the mid 90s, Don King was his promotional company was massive. They called it the Kingdom. He had a lot of fighters. He had too many fighters for, he had some, and he had that pipeline to Europe and other parts of the world.
Right.
And I forgot the name of the guy. Maybe he's Brian Cannon. I don't know. There was some guy who was in charge of Don King's publications. And he would reach out to me because I knew who like Fabrice Tiozzo was. Some guy from France. Like I was that geek who knew who these guys were. Some guy from the Philippines or whatever. I'm like, oh, I know who that is. I'll talk to him. I was really excited to get on the phone with them and interview them. And so I did that, and it paid pretty well. I mean, but at this time, Don King did tons of shows, tons of pay-per-view shows. And on these pay-per-view shows, they'd start like in at noon, right? There'd be like 20 fights on these cards. And, it's noon here in America, in Vegas, but it's prime time in France somewhere. So these world champions were fighting right off the bat, and, it's guys like, the Tiozzo brothers, Ricardo Lopez, who was an amazing fighter, but he was a strawweight from Mexico. And he never got that shine, he'd be something else. Now he was fighting now. Oh my God, Ricardo Lopez. He's undefeated in all these fights and he's like perfection, right? I'm writing about these guys and gradually and I don't know how many shows Don did, but Don did a fight program for every pay-per-view show.
Mm-hmm.
He did a thick fight program. And by the late 90s, I had graduated to writing about Evander Holyfield and Lennox Lewis and, whatever, Julio Cesar Chavez and that. So that was great. That was great experience that right there. And Don, I think King was part owner in a company, was part owner with a New York City based publisher named Ralph Paniagua. Uh-huh. And they put out a magazine called Latino Boxing that was bilingual. It was in English and in Spanish. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot of work for that. And to help make ends meet, I was teaching journalism because I could teach at community colleges because I had a master's degree.
Right.
So I did that, but I only taught like part-time. Like I taught 2 classes. That's what I had 2 classes. And I'm trying to think, was that every day? I don't know if it was every day. I think I was teaching like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or something. And I would have 2 classes on that day at Santa Monica College. And then the other days I was free to do the freelance work.
Awesome.
And I didn't have, I had just gotten married and we didn't have kids. And I had all this time. I didn't realize how much time I had, but I had a lot of, it was nice. I had enough time and I was able to make ends meet at that time. We couldn't like save to buy a house with the money I was making, but I could contribute to the rent and groceries and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah. And able to immerse yourself in the sport while you're at it.
Right. And I was doing what I wanted to do. And it was a thrill to interface with the boxing people here in Los Angeles, but then also to get on the phone with somebody like Norman Stone when I'm doing a story on John Ruiz, right?
Yeah.
And hearing this crazy guy go off and just slam everybody in the sport. I didn't know people were like that. I didn't know like that part of the boxing business, the resentment and the angry guy, give me my respect. Like I'd never heard. I'm like, whoa, this guy hates everybody. I'm just like, I probably have some tapes of the interviews with Stoney, but man, but
he was a character,
right?
He was a character,
a total character. There was another guy from Britain when I was doing a story on Lennox Lewis, Frank Maloney. Uh-huh. He was the same way, a British dude, big chip on his shoulder. You Yanks, and you never believed in our guy. And I'm like, no, I like Lennox. I think he can fight. No, you don't. No, we're going to prove you wrong. I'm like, no, I think he's going to win the fight. What are you talking about? But whatever. I think that's just part of it. It's a combat sports. And so people get combative.
Yeah.
And the business is ruthless. It's tough. So you get burned or you feel slighted.
Get resentful. Yeah.
Yeah. But you learn about that. So yeah. And you learn everybody's different. But and around this time, I'm going to press conferences, top ranked press conferences or HBO press conferences.
Yeah.
I'm meeting Larry Merchant and Jim Lampley and, whoever's fighting on that card. I'm attending the press conferences for Forum Boxing.
Yeah.
And so I'm meeting fighters from Mexico and fight people from Puerto Rico and South America, and very exciting.
What a fun transition though, to go from, again, reading these pages of Ring Magazine, reading the fighters, learn about their bios. And the next thing you know, you're writing about them and you're interviewing them. And
I know them. I know their names. Mm-hmm. I know that if I don't know what they look like, I know their names. Yeah. Right. So I'm mingling before or after a press conference and I learn somebody's name or somebody's manager or whatever. And as soon as I hear their name, I have this automatic recall to like a dozen Ring Magazine articles that I've read, some other boxing magazine. And I'm like, oh, you managed so-and-so.
You already have the backstory.
75, right? Or you did, this, and they're impressed by that. Like, holy crap, you know my resume. And then they open up to you more. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then they give you their number. Hey, call me anytime, and that kind of thing. And the same thing with trainers, same thing with fighters too. Yeah. You know what I mean? A fighter is impressed if you know their amateur accolades, right? Mm-hmm. Or where they're from, or some story about them.
Well, they know you're authentic then, and not just, I think fighters in general, people in the boxing business, just like you said, they're, they're used to people using them, taking advantage.
Right.
So they are a little bit of a guarded crowd until they realize that you're authentic, you're genuine, and you have good intentions.
Right.
And if you come with that kind of background knowledge, they're like, okay, this guy's legit. He knows the business. He's trustworthy.
Right. And if they were an LA based fighter, or they would fight at the Forum or the Olympic or whatever, or if they fought in the LA area a lot, they often worked out at the LA Boxing Club. So sometimes they would recognize me from the LA Boxing Club.
Yeah.
Now, I came in after hours. I came in after 5. But on weekends, I would go there in the morning, because on weekends, because they had 3 rings. They had more rings than any other gym. So, and it was kind of centrally located. It was like the hub. It was in downtown Los Angeles. So people from the Valley and people from the southern counties, they all would come up. They would all congregate there at the LA Boxing Club, and the sparring was amazing. So I used to go there on Saturday just to be around that energy.
Yeah.
So fighters, whether they were amateurs or professionals or veterans or champions, they'd see everybody. And so after a while, they start to recognize you. Okay, you're that guy. Yeah, Kevin Morgan is training you. I'm like, Kevin. Right. So
it becomes a tightly,
and that helps.
Yeah, it's a tightly knit community when it comes right down to it.
That's true. Yeah. Even in an area as large and sprawling as LA County, Southern California. Yeah, it is. It doesn't take long to get to know everybody.
No. So how long did you write for Ring before you got assigned as editor to the magazine?
Well, when did I sign on to the Ring? I came on to the Ring in late 2008. It was late 2008, like November, December 2008. First major card that I covered with the co-editor of the website, Michael Rosenthal, was the De La Hoya Pacquiao fight in Vegas. So a long time, because at the time that we were hired, Rosenthal and I, Nigel Collins was still editor-in-chief.
Yep.
And he was editor-in-chief for a few years. He was editor-in-chief at the time that Golden Boy Promotions bought them, I think in 2007. And I think they had a nice honeymoon period for about 3 yeers. And then what happened in 2009 or 2008, 2009 Mayweather came out of retirement. And which was great, a former star, a former pound for pound king. He had retired. He said he'd retired. Right. And then he, after the Hatton victory, he just sat out 2008, right? Yeah. He comes back 2009. He beats Juan Manuel Marquez that September. Yeah. And then all the talk is Mayweather Pacquiao. And really the sport got divided. It was kind of crazy. Pacquiao was with Top Rank at the time, and Golden Boy forged a relationship with Floyd Mayweather. And so they were team Mayweather. And Golden Boy, which was still kind of an upstart at the time, but very powerful because of Oscar, and Richard Schaefer was the CEO, and he was headstrong and bold, and kind of ruthless in some ways, in a business sense. Ambitious. That's the word. They were ambitious. It was natural. They were going to butt heads with Bob Arum and company. Right. And, they were doing business for a while. They did some nice co-promotions, like the rubber match between Eric Morales and Marco Antonio Barrera. That was a co-promotion. And when Shane Mosley fought Antonio Margarito in January of 2009, I think it was at Staples Center. That was a co-promotion, but little by little they agitated each other, and they were competing for the same fighters. Yeah. So if Golden Boy signed some kid like Frankie Gomez that Top Rank was after, they get pissed, Yeah. And the resentment builds, but then finally, really, it came to a head with making this super fight between Pacquiao and Mayweather when it should have been made, right? Like 2010, 2011.
Originally, yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't happen when these guys were still at their peaks, right? And it got nasty. And the Cold War, we called it the Cold War in the media.
Yeah.
Where they weren't doing business with each other, and they were fighting each other for HBO dates. And eventually De La Hoya and company went over to Showtime, along with Al Heyman and all his fighters and all. And that even complicated matters more because now you have a network on one side and a network on the other side. Right. This Cold War. But I really think that Nigel Collins was caught between this Cold War because Nigel was, he was going to call it like he sees it. But he, of the two fighters, Collins was a Pacquiao guy.
Right.
And just by having like Pacquiao number 1 pound for pound over Mayweather, that drove Golden Boy crazy.
Yeah.
Probably it drove Floyd crazy and or Al Heyman crazy. And they would call Golden Boy and, hey, don't you guys own this magazine? What's up? But one thing led to another. And I heard that Schaefer didn't like it when Collins or somebody who worked for Collins would criticize an HBO card that was a Golden Boy promotion.
Yeah.
Eventually, whatever, they cleaned house.
Right.
They got rid of Collins. I think it was like in late 2011 or early 2012 or whatever, but they got rid of Collins and Eric Raskin and William Detloff. Later, guys, you're out here. And they promoted Michael Rosenthal to editor-in-chief. And so Rosenthal was editor-in-chief for a number of years until they got rid of him. And then I became in late 2017. So Rosenthal had a good 5 to 6 year run as editor-in-chief. And he did a great job. Nigel did a great job.
I mean, that has to be kind of a pinnacle. That has to be kind of a pinnacle for you, though. I mean, growing up reading the magazine, being a fight fan, writing for the magazine, then they hand you the keys. I mean, that's got to feel a little bit like, I don't know, Charlie Bucket when Willy Wonka gives him the keys in the elevator kind of thing. It's got to feel like, I own the chocolate factory now.
It was stressful. I didn't like the way that Rosenthal was dismissed. And I know Rosenthal had his struggles, especially when Schaefer was still around, because Schaefer had no problem leaning on editorial. Schaefer didn't lean on me, but he would lean on Michael, especially like stupid stuff like the pound for pound list, like Adrian Broner should be in the pound for pound, and we're like, but he's not there yet, and so Schaefer would, bring, I'm creating a new position, the ratings chairman, and it was a retired judge, Chuck Giampa. And his domain is the pound for pound list, but you guys got to run the rankings by him. I'm just like, what? So I knew like it was stressful just from a journalistic standpoint. It's an uneasy relationship when you're a boxing magazine that's owned by a boxing promoter.
Right.
So I knew there was that aspect of the job, but I knew it was stressful. I know that at least for 1 week out of every month, Michael was he called it crunch time. I'm in it this week, magazine crunch time. And he would just be like, I can't take any calls. I can't deal with any of this. The website is yours. Handle this crap. I'm in crunch time. Hey, we got real deadlines here, hard deadlines. I'm like, okay. So I knew that it was no walk in the park, but a great honor. I got Ring magazines going back to 1980. I got magazines that I bought when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
So,
and you follow in the footsteps of some, boxing icons, like you said, Nat Fleischer, Burt Sugar.
Yeah.
I mean,
Burt Sugar
here's a fun thing.
Mine.
This was, I have Training for Boxers by Nat Fleischer. This was my first boxing coach.
One of those.
This is my first boxing coach. I've literally have.
Yeah. Where is it? Hold on. I got one.
I have things highlighted in here. Like, I don't know why I did this. It's kind of weird.
The rings. There you go. The rings, how to box.
I have that one too.
You have that one too? There you go. Yeah.
I don't think I highlighted this one though. But yeah, those are classics. That was before the internet. You had to learn somehow, and you learned from print. I read Ring magazine from cover to cover because that's how I figured I could absorb the most knowledge about the sport without having direct access to some of these guys you're talking about.
Yeah. So no, it was a great honor, and I hit the ground running because I think Michael and company were right in the middle of a magazine cycle.
Yep.
So I had to finish up that magazine. And then I think by the end of October of 2017, I was starting my first magazine.
Yeah.
And it was, you learn trial and error,
of course.
Trial by fire.
Yeah.
You learn from your mistakes. And but for the most part, I've been lucky. The managing editor, Brian Hardy, he's now the senior editor, and the associate editor, who's now the managing editor, Tom Gray, helped me out tremendously. And Michael Rosenthal had a system that I just kind of picked up, had a spreadsheet system. And I talked to the controller of the subsidiary that is the company of Ring Magazine, Sports and Entertainment Publications. Her name is Deborah Harris. And Deborah said, Deborah used to be around the office when the Ring Magazine offices were like right outside of Philadelphia. Right. So she was around Nigel, and she said Nigel had a bunch of calendars. He had a number of calendars that he would mark up. And I'm like, yeah, I got to do that. So I got like 4 or 5 whiteboards, dry erase boards, where I list out, all the stories of the upcoming magazine. And then I have a calendar of the present month. And then I have a calendar with like 4 months, like, like an advanced look, like 3 months ahead.
Yeah.
So I can plan everything and keep the editorial deadline and the cover deadline and the print deadline in my head, and the dates of when it mails out to subscribers and when it goes on sale on shelves, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's gained some complexities too, because you also have Ring TV and social platforms and all that. How involved are you in all that working together?
I'm less involved with the website than I was before I became editor-in-chief of the magazine, but I still kind of oversee the website.
Sure.
I still post stuff. I still post stuff. I'll still update the homepage. I have my mailbag, which is 20 years old, by the way. It's
that's awesome.
Twice a week column that's basically letters to the editor.
Yep.
Fans sound off on whatever they want to sound off on, and then I give my 2 cents, 3 or 4 cents. I'm long-winded. They are too, and I don't cut, because I used to write letters to the editor, and they would be long letters, and they would boil that sucker down. They had to, and I'd be like, oh, they didn't get to that other thing,
Well, boxing fans can be passionate. I was like,
I'm going to print their entire email, all of it, and I'm going to answer everything, I do the Ring ratings update as well. So that's every week or every other week, where it's basically, I kind of summarize what the Ring ratings panel talked about in terms of Ring rated fighters advancing or dropping in the rankings, or new faces entering the rankings, right off the weekend, right after they fight, we get together. It's an email chain.
Yeah.
And say, okay, Demetrius Andrade, how did he look? Is he still the number 3 middleweight? Is beating Liam Smith, who was number 9 rated? Does that move him up a spot? And they say, no, he stays the number 3, and Williams drops a spot or whatever, And so I like to be transparent, and I like to let everyone know, how we come to our conclusions.
Right.
So if you're on the Ring ratings panel and you have an opinion, I tell people, like, listen, I'm gonna share this with the public. If you think somebody sucks, if you're saying this person doesn't deserve to advance, and here's the reason why, I'm gonna share that with folks.
Well, that's good. The transparency is nice, right?
Yeah, you don't get that with the sanctioning body rankings.
No,
you don't get that with the other rankings. Like exactly who voted which way. What was the consensus? Was it a slight majority or was it a vast majority? Was it
Right.
unanimous? These decisions. So
Yeah.
and it's democratic, and I want everybody to know that, and I want everybody to know that they're not my rankings. It's not just my opinion. It's not like I don't make these unilateral changes. It's a democratic process, and a lot of times, not a lot of times, but sometimes I disagree. I disagree with the majority, but I go with the majority.
Right.
And I go.
Well, again, back in the day, that Ring magazine that had a pullout, the center section was the pound for pound rankings and all the rankings in every category. And every month I'd grab it and put it on my bulletin board, and just follow that. And back in the day, I mean, probably maybe before your time, but back in the day, there was no way to know. The newspapers didn't cover every little fight. So the only way you'd find out about 75% of the fights was waiting for Ring magazine to come out that next month and tell you who won on the undercard, what the fights came out like, and give you any kind of insights. Because the major newspapers didn't care.
Well, the major newspapers were mostly concerned with the really huge events, big time boxing, or what was local, and what locally had general interest.
Yeah.
And anything outside of that bubble, they weren't going to get to that. Oftentimes, not always. I mean, there were fight towns that had a dedicated boxing writer or columnist that did understand boxing. If they didn't love it, they at least understood it and had experience in covering it. Jack Fisk up in San Francisco, right? Going back for decades. Or in New York City, there was a bunch of guys. There was Michael Katz and Wally Matthews, and what's his name? Who's with the Post? He became a publicist with Don King. I'm spacing out on his name. Mike Marley.
There you go.
Yeah, there was a bunch of guys, and then in Philadelphia you had Bernard Fernandez, and in Boston you had George Kimball and Ron Borges, and same thing. And yet you had your guys in Atlantic City, and you had your guys in Reno. And in Las Vegas and, San Francisco, Los Angeles, you had some dedicated boxing writers, but everywhere else, that was just a sports writer, who's like, okay, you're assigned the fight, oh man, I hate boxing. You're assigned the fight, do it, and
the bigger cities were different.
It's going to come out in the writing, right? I mean, the way boxing was covered in Springfield, Missouri, where I lived as a teenager, very matter of fact, Larry Holmes fought. He won. He outpointed him.
Yeah.
What do you want us to say? If I wanted analysis, I had to wait for the Ring magazine.
Exactly.
If I wanted to know who fought on the undercard, I had to wait for Ring magazine.
Yeah.
They weren't going to include all that stuff. And if I wanted to know what was happening outside of America, obviously I got to wait for Ring magazine.
Yeah. What a history it's had, though. I mean, 1922 first came out, and you guys are heading into an anniversary year, right?
We are. It's going to come fast too.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's already almost May.
Yeah.
Like, good grief. Yeah.
Well, this past year has been challenging, and I think it's made time go by faster. What impact did that have on you guys, this whole pandemic and trying to keep the magazine going? I mean, I know you guys relied on a bunch of special issues.
Yeah.
Like these, like the ones with the Four Kings.
Oh, you got the Four Kings.
Of course.
I don't even have that. I don't even have the Four Kings.
Did that come out during that? It did, didn't it? So you
that
guys
was 2020.
You kind of didn't rely on the what was happening daily in the sports, but you kind of focused on specific fighters and huge events like that.
That's right. The live schedule was wiped. It was wiped starting in mid-March, and we didn't know when it was going to come back.
Yeah.
And luckily, we'd already started working on the Four Kings because we were planning for we were going to be at the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
Right.
Because the class of 2020 was really good. I think it was Bernard Hopkins, Shane Mosley, and Juan Manuel Marquez. And we're like, okay, man, those guys, they have fans, and we have we're close to all three of them. Yeah. And we could do a special issue just on that induction weekend, but we want to have something to sell while we're there. And most of the folks who go there or kind of like, around our age, and they have obviously a taste for nostalgia.
Sure.
And the Four Kings is not ancient history. It's not like going back to the 20s, 30s, or 40s or whatever, where I think kind of newer fans kind of like, they see the black and white, the grainy, or they're like, well, there's no film of Ray Robinson at welterweight. Well, then how do I know he was any good? If I don't see it on YouTube, I don't really believe it, or, but the Four Kings, it's 80s. It's not high def, you know
Still
what I mean?
relevant.
But it's color. And, so recent enough to where it's like, okay, I'll check these fights out. And, you can even get younger fans into it. And we were figuring we were just going to sell them. We'll have a booth there and we would just sell them live during induction weekend. And so we'd already started working on it. And then the schedule got wiped out and we're like, okay, let's move this up. Let's not wait till the summer. Let's do this next. Right.
That was good fortune.
Yeah, it was. And it sold out.
Yeah.
We sold all of them. That went into second printing.
Oh, really?
That lets you know how iconic those four are. And rest in peace to Marvin Hagler.
Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah. So we did that. That was eye-opening. And what was also eye-opening was the number of e-shop sales that we did, the online shop. They really sold from there. And so we're like, okay, let's do another one of these. And we followed it up with the Gotti Ward trilogy, a special issue just on the friendly but fierce rivalry between Arturo Gotti and Mickey Ward.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of that issue. I really am. It's like one of the things I like about that issue is, I didn't cover that series. I'm over here on the West Coast. The night that Gotti and Ward fought for the first time, I was covering a Kostya fight in Vegas.
Oh my gosh.
A Kostya fight. I love Kostya, but a boring fight. I think he fought Ben Tacky and just outclassed him over 12 rounds. I don't know what it was. I couldn't even call it a sparring session because Tacky just couldn't compete.
Yeah.
And Zoo didn't feel like sticking his nose in there. So, we had a purist delight, one guy, virtuoso performance. And I think right after the fight, or even like maybe 11th or 12th round, everybody, our cell phones started buzzing from the East Coast. People are calling us about the Gotti Ward fight.
Yeah.
And the only way we could see it was via tape delay. We were at the Mandalay Bay in Vegas. And the only way we could see the fight was the tape delay Boxing After Dark broadcast, which came on around 11:30 West Coast time. Yeah. And to watch it at the sports.
I'm not sure anybody saw that fight coming.
We didn't want spoilers. We didn't want to know who won.
Right.
But it was buzzing, and we're like, I'm not answering this. I know someone's going to tell me about the fight, and I want to see it for myself. So that's how we watch. You watch it on TV, and the same thing for fight number 2 and 3. I wasn't there, so we assigned Nigel Collins and Eric Raskin. And it was good. It was good just to kind of have that bridge because of the way that they were let go those years before. I know there was a lot of bad blood, and it was just important to me to like, okay, it's a new era in the magazine. And, let's get these folks who used to put out the magazine to contribut to this.
Right.
And everybody who contributed to that, they had such fond memories.
Yeah, that's great.
And everybody who was interviewed for it, Lou DiBella and Kathy Duva, the matchmaker Jolene Mazzoli. Is that how you say her name? Mazzoli?
Mazzoli, yeah.
Jolene?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I say it correctly? Okay. And who's Gotti's manager? Great guy. Spacing out on his name. He was great. Everybody had great anecdotes. Ron Borges, who was very close to Mickey Ward. He had a lot of great anecdotes, and he wrote one of the stories.
What a great way and time to bring everybody together to do that.
Right.
And obviously everybody had the time suddenly.
Right. And we followed that up with Mike Tyson, and that was Tyson's Tyson.
Yeah. He's always
but what was great is that he cooperated with that. He cooperated with the previous magazine, which was like this mythical matchup between Tyson Fury and Mike Tyson.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that one too.
And then he agreed to be interviewed and kind of participate in his own special, which is pretty cool. Because Tyson doesn't always feel like talking about himself. He doesn't always feel like talking about boxing. So when he feels it, he feels it. But, for a long period, he was burnt out on the sport. He was kind of sick of it, but it's great when he does feel that passion and he's it's like that vintage historian.
Yeah. Yes.
He's like a boxing geek, you know.
He is.
He can sit there and tell you about Lou Ambers, you know. I love that about him. That's the Tyson I love. I love boxing historian Tyson. I love that weird Tyson that starts talking about mythology and stuff, you know. Talk about Hercules and Achilles, and I'm like, what?
Yeah. Like, he had that whole HBO series for a while where he'd go back and analyze some of the old fights and all that.
I love that.
I did too.
I loved watching his take on the former heavyweight champions. That was one of those specials, and I loved his analysis of Sonny Liston and Floyd Patterson and all those guys. Yeah.
So,
and he loved Jack Dempsey, which made sense.
Well, like, the black shoes.
Kind of like a modern day Dempsey. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, he said he was inspired by him and Sonny Liston.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so aside from those special issues, how has this changed you guys' approach to the magazine? Has it made you rethink things? Have you realized things about the business you did before?
Yes, there will be more of these, especially as we go into the 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, the current state of the game, the current state of the sport, or maybe I should say the state of the business, it's so fractured, and fights that should happen just don't happen. It's like, what are we going to write about? What is worthy of the cover? If the current game isn't worthy of the cover, then why not look to yesteryear? Because we are boxing history. We're 100 years old.
Yeah.
How many institutions hit that centennial mark, that century mark? It's very rare.
Especially in the print world.
Yeah. Yeah. So if Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua is made tomorrow, well, guess what? That's going to be on the cover of our next magazine.
Yeah.
If Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence were to announce that they're going to fight, you know, in the winter, well, that's going to be on a cover. But until that happens, you know, and depending on what happens in the fight, you know, the aftermath of a fight like that, that's cover worthy.
Right.
You know, and yeah, you know, you'll have these fighters who are kind of transcendent and popular. I mean, I know we ruffled some feathers putting this kid on here, you know, but you know what? He's got a following, you know,
he does.
And he agreed to do a studio shoot with us. He gets it. Like, he's like, okay, we gave him cover concepts and he went along with all of them.
Yeah.
But you know what? In January, he fought a real guy. He fought a real contender and beat Luke Campbell. And now he's fighting Javier Ortuna.
Yep.
That's another contender. That's a dangerous fight.
Yeah.
But okay, kid, you know, it's not just about your popularity, your social media following, and your looks. In fact, you got to fight the fights.
Right.
Now, if the new generation, and you know, before him, we had two covers with Teofimo Lopez, right? Because Teofimo stepped up. He fought Vasily Lomachenko. He fought a great fighter, and he beat
delivered.
Him. So, and he delivered
Yeah.
exactly, right? And also, like Ryan, he agreed to do a studio shoot for the cover. So he's also gets it. He cooperates, right? So right on, man. And he likes the belt that you guys so beautifully and ornately manufacture, that you guys create this glowing. I don't know. It's like the Holy Grail. Yeah. It's amazing. It's the ring championship. You know, Lopez is into that. So obviously somebody like that, guys who get it, like Lopez and Tyson Fury or Ryan Garcia or whatever. Yeah, they're going to get on the covers. But otherwise, you know, we need the fights to happen. We need the big events again. We need what we had in the 80s with the Four Kings. Right. If we're not going to get it, you know what? We're gonna pay tribute to the Kings, to Marvin Hagler. He's on the cover of our next issue. After that, it's going to be Sugar Ray Robinson, because on May 3rd, it would have been his 100th birthday.
Oh, wow.
We've got all these archival photos of Rob. I mean, I've got right here on my desk, I've got photos from 1942 of Robinson fighting Marty Servo.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? It's like, nobody has this.
Yeah.
Nobody's got that.
Yeah.
So let's educate the public as well. If you don't know how great Ray is, read about him and read these archival fight reports, you know, that were written, the night of or the week after, and go back in time. Because when you read the reprinted fight reports, it's like, wow, this guy wasn't even a pro for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And they knew he was special. They were already saying this guy's one of the greatest pugilists of all time. They were saying that. Nat Flasher was saying that in 1942. Like, we're witnessing greatness right now.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It wasn't after the fact. It was during.
Well, it helps you gain an understanding when you look into that of what made those guys so great and why they're still talked about. What made Sugar Ray Robinson the greatest fighter of all time.
Fighting a lot and fighting
every
the
month.
best.
Every month.
Yeah, and being entertaining.
Yeah.
And being and having a personality, having charm, charisma, knowing how to deal with the media. Like, he could deal with the media. He was notoriously difficult for promoters to deal with.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. Right. There's a lot of reasons why he didn't fight for the welterweight title until the end of 1946, when he was already considered the best welterweight, best lightweight and welterweight in 1942. Yeah. He was number one in 2 divisions. In fact, he beat Sammy Angot, who was the lightweight champ, but it was a non-title fight. So, I mean, he was already at the top of his game in 1942. He didn't get that shot until 1946, in part. And there's up there, World War II is a factor. Racism is a factor. But one of the big factors, apart from him not cooperating with organized crime,
that was a factor.
He was like, I know people love me. I was popular as an amateur. I put butts in those seats.
Well, he was one of the first guys. He was one of the first guys to dictate terms to the promoters. Yes. Say, no, this is what I'll fight for. This is how much I get of the gate. They didn't like that because they had all the cards before that.
They weren't used to that.
He had the talent to say, really? No, I'm going to make the terms.
Yeah, but here's the thing: they would still use them. They'd be like, actually, they would tell him to go screw himself. Yeah, and he would go to Philadelphia or Chicago or Detroit. Or Boston or wherever, or he would go to Europe, and just, okay, later, and draw there. And draw there. And then he comes back and he's bigger than ever. But the thing about Ray was he was a pop star. Like, he had the look, he had the way he dressed, he had the entourage.
He was the first guy to have an entourage.
Yeah. He had an entourage.
When he was a smart businessman too. Yeah, he was the first guy to own that whole block in Harlem that had the barber shop
dry
and
cleaners, a bar, a restaurant, whatever else. I don't know, but he was in the whole thing. He had but image. He understood branding, right? That's what he did. He had the flamingo pink Cadillac Eldorado. And he drives around in that, and everyone, there goes Sugar Ray. Yeah. Nobody else had a car like that. He's smart. Like, nobody else has a car like this. Because they didn't make that color. That was custom. He made that. He had that color custom made, custom painted on there. So it was. If you saw that color, it had to be his. Yeah, right? He's smart like that.
Businessman.
So right. So if you don't know that, when you read the special issue, you'll hear all these stories.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You learn about the fight side, the business side. The unsavory part of the business back then, which was the mob. Yeah. They had their fingers in everything. You couldn't avoid them.
Right.
So you learn a little bit about that, but you learn about what made him so popular. Mm-hmm. And, you see his popularity outside of the ring as well. Because he was like, he was like a Jack Dempsey type. Like, he was a celebrity.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to that. Yeah. I got to share something with you. I did have a brush with greatness when I was published as a photographer in Ring Magazine.
When was this? What year?
I don't know when it was. I did a photo shoot with Antoine Eccles. Do you remember him?
Of course. He's Dynamite?
Yeah, he's fighting out of Kansas City. And I did a photo shoot with him, and somehow the Ring came in to do a story on him. And they needed pictures, and I was the guy. I don't even have the issue anymore, but it's there.
Was it 90s or 2000s?
It was before. I think it was heading into the Bernard Hopkins fight.
The first one?
I think so.
So 1999. 1999.
Yeah,
you know that fight?
I've lost track.
That fight was the first fight where I looked at Bernard and I thought, you're not just a hard-nosed Philly middleweight title holder.
Yeah.
You're an elite boxer.
Yeah.
Because I knew how dangerous Eccles was.
He was heavy-handed.
Talent,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. He had talent and athleticism and incredible power in both hands.
And big hands.
Big, powerful hands. And he was tough.
Yeah.
Like he was not easily deterred. Very determined fighder. And to beat him, you had to be something special.
Yeah.
The version that Bernard fought twice. Yeah. That guy was crazy. And a little bit crazy. He's a character.
Yeah. No, I remember watching him spar in the gym. He sparred with a local guy named Maurice Brantley. And a couple times after we were talking, and he said he felt like he just had like a sack of bricks in his, just like a sack of rocks, just hitting him with the burlap sack of rocks.
Big gloves too.
Oh my gosh,
that was probably 18-ounce gloves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I mean,
some guys have it.
He had a trouble getting sparring partners. He'd stiff guys in the gym. Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it. Wow. I'm gonna have to look for that. Okay. Probably
You'll find
1999.
I remember he was in leopard skin shorts or something like that. Yeah.
Of course.
I'm sure the pictures weren't that great.
Did you get a byline? Did you get a photo credit?
My name is in there. Yeah. My name is in there. Yeah.
Right on.
That's my brush with greatness with Ring Magazine. My one shot.
Not bad at all. Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, let's talk about some of today's fighters. Who do you like out there right now that's fighting? You mentioned Teofimo Lopez. He's exciting. He's an exciting young fighter. Errol Spence is still out there. Terrence Crawford's not getting the big fights, but he's still.
I enjoy watching Crawford fight. I enjoy watching him fight. I wish he had just like 1% of Sugar Ray Robinson's charm.
I know. Well,
just for his own good, just to help him out. I feel like he's something special. And I know he's something special. I can see it with my own eyes. And when I talk to guys, I had a sit down interview with Thomas Hearns, James Toney, Zab Judah, and Buddy McGirt. Okay. Those guys know a thing or two about boxing, right? We're talking about Hall of Famers and future Hall of Famers. And I asked them, who's the one fighter out there that you guys really admire? And they all said it at the same time, in unison, Terrence Crawford. I say, that guy, we love to watch him work. He could fight in our era. Everyone said, they all said that. That's a guy that would have been fighting in our era. No problem. And I believe that. I believe the best fighters of every era could fight in any era. Mm-hmm. And including today. Like if you look at who's in our pound for pound list, if you put them in a time machine and sent them back to the 90s or the 80s, 70s or before, they may not win all the time, but nobody would blow them out.
Right.
So the guys, I thought Juan Estrada lost his most recent fight to Chocolatito.
Yeah.
And Roman Gonzalez is my favorite fighter.
Yeah.
My man right here. This cat right here.
Dude
right here. This is the guy right here. He's one of those guys. I love watching him fight because of the way he fights, obviously.
Yeah.
That kind of volume, that kind of technique, that kind of pressure, that type of craft. It's very rare. Yeah. And for him to still be going strong in his 30s and, he started out as a strawweight, that's very rare as well. So, I make note of that. But Juan Francisco Estrada and Canelo Alvarez, I think those are two of the best fighters to come out of Mexico of all time. Like they would be top 20.
And Canelo is really a complete fighter. I mean, his defensive skills, people have just now started to realize what he gained from losing that Mayweather fight, which was an understanding of
from every fight.
Yeah.
He gained from every fight. Every fight up to that fight, and then every subsequent fight. I could see it. He's getting better. He's working on different things. The best thing about the Mayweather fight is that gave him a taste of the big time, the huge stage. Because even future Hall of Famers, like let's say Gennady Golovkin or the late great Marvin Hagler, when they're on that huge stage for the first time, they're a little tight. Mm-hmm. Hagler was a little bit reserved fighting Roberto Duran.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure he welcomed that fight. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 1983. He's still in his prime. He's a middleweight champion. He's like, well, a former lightweight champion wants to fight me, bring it on. He's got a name. It's a big event. Cover of Sports Illustrated, all that kind of stuff. Well, once he's in the ring, he's like, oh, this is Duran. You know what I mean?
Tough to prepare for that.
He was a little bit like, holy crap, And the same thing for the early rounds against Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler fans don't want to admit that, but he's like,
huge event.
I wanted this for all these years, and now here I am. Same thing, Gennady Golovkin, that first fight with Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah.
Canelo was used to it.
Yeah.
Been there and done that. He'd been to the big dance.
Yeah.
He'd been to the Super Bowl. So the bright lights and the pressure didn't affect him as much as it affected Golovkin. But he had to experience that first against Mayweather. Because he'd been in, he'd headlined big shows, but nothing like that.
Not a Mayweather fight,
And that's,
that brings a circus with it.
Right, the circus.
Yeah.
That's an edge that Canelo's going to have over everybody he fights. When no matter what their age is that he's been at that big stage. He's used to the pressure. He's used to the obligations. And right now, an edge that he has over all the fighters is that he's fighting more often. He fought in December. He fought in February. He's coming right back in May. So in a span of a few months, he's had 3 camps, which basically means he's been training like the old timers.
He's unusually active, just like that. Yep.
And the other guys don't have that. Everybody else is on a 1 or 2 fight per year schedule, and they don't progress the way they should progress.
Yeah, certainly at the rate he is.
Yeah. So I love fighters that want to be active. Obviously, I love to hear fighters want to challenge themselves. I'm quite fond of Jamel Herring. He's just a great guy. But after, it's not just because he shouted me out, but after he outclassed Carl Frampton, which
he did
surprised a lot of people. He says, "I want to fight another belt holder. I want to be a lineal champion. I want to be the Ring Magazine champion. I want to be the champion. I like fighters who strive for greatness." And the female fighters, Katie Taylor and Clarissa Shields, wanting to be undisputed.
Yeah.
I tip my hat to them. Amanda Serrano, I know she wants to be undisputed. She's fighting, 7 different weight classes or whatever.
Yeah.
They're very hungry. So I love hungry fighters who have talent. But even more important than talent is that drive, that passion. I love to see good craft in the ring, but I also want to see this hunger and this sense of urgency about their careers and their legacies. And once they're inside those ropes, I want to see them. I want some Ray Robinson in there. Man. I like the power of emotion, but I want to show. And if you can close the show, close the show.
Absolutely. So who's out there that you're familiar with, but maybe you're flying under the radar a little bit? Are the Edgar Berlangas of the world, the guys that are just now making their mark, maybe getting a little bit of notoriety, but not, not there yet, not
right.
in the big
great
public
when
eye.
Those guys. Yeah, it's great when those guys get a showcase like Berlanga and people get on the bandwagon and get excited about them. And there's that guy. What's his name? In the Dominican Republic, he's also a top ranked guy. Elvis Rodriguez. I like him.
Yep.
Like people know about him because he's fought in the top ranked bubbles a bunch of time, and he's been on ESPN, so people know about him.
Yeah.
I do some streams out here of club shows, Thompson Boxing, Golden Boys developmental series, and Tom Loeffler's 360 series. So I see some guys that they're still at the 8-round level, and they haven't fought on TV yet. And one of those guys just fought this past Sunday, and his name is Ruben Torres. He's a 5'11", almost 6 foot tall lightweight who could fight easily at junior welterweight. He might be a junior welterweight now, but he's either 140 or 135. He's 23 years old, so he could probably still make 135.
Yeah.
But he looks like he's on his way to becoming a complete fighter. Because he's tall and rangy, and he knows how to fight tall. He can stick and move. He's got a lot of power, a lot of speed and athleticism, good timing. He's very relaxed and poised in the ring, very accurate with his power punches. kind of guy who can score like sensational knockouts, but he's a good infighter. He's one of these tall, rangy guys who's very comfortable fighting on the inside. He has good combinations, good body shots.
Like a Tommy
I
Hearns.
think, yeah, exactly. Right. Everyone thinks about Tommy Hearns, that jab and that right hand. He had a great hook, great body shots, great uppercuts, great combos, great fighter. That's high praise. The kid looks like he's that kind of template. An explosive thin man, of the Alexis Arguello mold, or Bob Foster mold, but he doesn't punch like Bob Foster and Arguello, but he can punch. Yeah, he can really punch. But he's a good boxer, a good athlete. He's got a nice personality, good head on his shoulders. Yep. He's with Thompson Boxing, and they have proven to be able to, from a grassroots level, develop homegrown talent. Yep. They did that with Tim Bradley. Yeah. They did that with the junior featherweight, Daniel Roman. Mm-hmm. He had 2 belts at 122 pounds, and he's still a top player at junior featherweight. Yeah. They've developed guys. Josecito Lopez, another tall, rangy boxer puncher. He's never won a world title, but he's been in there. He's been in that mix. He's been in big fights, fought the likes of Canelo and Keith Thurman, and always a tough cat. Yeah. They develop these type of fighters. If they've got the requisite talent that you need to have a contender, they'll get him there. They know how to. So he's in the right hands. They'll keep him busy even during a pandemic. Yep. And this guy's nickname is Ace, and he's like that ace card. I think he's going to make a name for himself in the next 2 years. Nice. What do you think about, before we wrap up here, what do you think about the whole celebrity boxing thing? I got to ask you that because it's a hot topic, and it's kind of polarizing, Some people think it's great for boxing, and some people think it's horrible for boxing. And we got the one that just happened with Logan Paul and Ben Askren, and then they're talking about the Mayweather and Jake Paul still. So yeah, and Oscar's coming back and fighting on that platform. Oh yeah, in July. Is that really going to happen? Probably against the MMA guy. I think it will. Yeah. The first title defense, Teofimo Lopez's first title defense against George Kambosos. That's going to be a thriller event, and I think Evander Holyfield is on that card. Oh, he's fighting Kevin McBride. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a thing. It's hot for right now. It's not going away anytime soon. Yeah. I don't think it's bad for boxing. I don't think it helps the rest of boxing. Right. I don't think it hurts it. Boxing hurts itself way worse than celebrity boxers can. The only thing that could hurt boxing is if one of these retired fighters gets hurt, physically hurt. Right. Yeah. That would hurt. That would hurt boxing. That would be bad. That would be bad because these guys are ambassadors, whether they like it or not. Guys like De La Hoya and Tyson and Holyfield, they're ambassadors of the sport. They are household names. Yeah. So if they get hurt, it's a bad look. It's a bad look for the sport, bad look for the commissions. It's a bad look for the promoters and all involved. So you do hope that it doesn't get out of control. It seems like with the production and the commentary, they kind of want to get out of control. That was my feeling with this past one, the Paul Askren. I think many felt that way. They wanted it to get vulgar, to get crass, to get crazy, and they did it. Mission accomplished. and when you do that, you're going to turn people off. Yeah. It was a 5-hour broadcast. I watched maybe an hour total of it. Yeah. I paid it, and I only tuned in with the boxing. Mm-hmm. So I watched, and I didn't pay that much attention to Cunningham Mir. Yeah, because it just wasn't that interesting, and Mir's not a boxer. He did okay for a non-boxer, actually. Yeah. I tuned into Prograis Red Koch, and Red Koch just wasn't in Prograis' class. So what happened, and I like Ivan, but man, he kind of went out like a sucker. Yeah. I feel bad for Prograis in that regard. And then the Jake Paul fight did not last long. Oh my gosh, that was embarrassing. Got him out of there. But you know what? Here's the thing. I like that the kid is taking boxing seriously because he doesn't have to.
Right.
He's a celebrity. He could half-ass it. He could fake it. They could do gentlemen's agreements. They could fake this stuff. He didn't have to choose boxing.
Yeah.
He could have done MMA. He's got a wrestling background. He could have done MMA. He could have done jiu-jitsu. He could have settled beefs playing games, playing Fortnite.
Sure.
Esports is huge. Esports is huge. He went with boxing, and I like that. I take a little bit of pride in that. Like, oh, our sport is still part of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
It resonates like that. That a kid, a 24-year-old, who is a YouTube influencer, something that a type of celebrity, a type of career that didn't exist 10 years ago. He's like, no, I'm going. Boxing is going to be the test of my mettle.
Yeah,
it's going to be boxing. It's going to be stand up fists, and he's actually training, and he's training with guys like BJ Flores, who texted me like maybe half a year ago saying, "Hey, this kid's looking good. He's taking it seriously," and Jellion Love, and I like seeing them. I like seeing that he's involving actual retired boxers,
right?
And they're getting involved. I like that. I like their involvement. And I don't think that Ben Askren was a bad opponent for somebody, a latecomer, somebody who just started boxing like a year, or 18 months ago.
Yeah.
For your third opponent, you know what I mean? We see Olympic gold medalists fight guys who were making their pro debuts when they were fighting in their third, fourth, and fifth pro bout.
Yeah.
Floyd Mayweather's fourth professional opponent was a guy making his pro debut.
Yeah.
Mayweather, once in a lifetime talent with that kind of family background, that kind of pedigree, father, a pro contender, uncle, a 2-division champion, an elite level amateur, an Olympic medalist, signs with Top Rank, the best at developing young talent. And they knew we could take baby steps, your fourth pro fight, you're going to fight this guy who's making his pro debut and he can't take a punch. You're going to look like Ray Robinson against this guy. Yeah. It's on YouTube. Mayweather's fourth pro fight. He's fighting a dude who, competent little boxer, but he was making his pro debut. And you get the sense that he didn't have an extensive amateur background. Yeah. So it's part of boxing.
Well, I had to ask you. It's interesting anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we wrap up here, how do people connect with Ring Magazine, Ring TV? Let us know your social channels and how to kind of stay up with publication.
I think the best way is to go to ringtv.com and to follow our Instagram account, at Ring TV, and our Twitter account, which is at Ring Magazine. And we also have a Facebook page, Ring TV Facebook. And that's the best way. That's the best way, because through there, if you want to subscribe, you can go to the eShop and you can buy old issues. You can buy stuff like, merch like this mug. Actually, this is sold out, but there's a white mug with a black logo. It's really cool.
Boxing fans, get out there and do it. Support Ring Magazine. We want you guys to be around for another 100 years. Doug, it's been a pleasure. An honor for us to be associated with Ring through the title belt. And, they're lucky to have someone with so much as passion and knowledge and at the helm of Ring Magazine as you have.
Hey, thanks, Doug. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you for watching this episode of Title Unboxed. If you're anything like me, you can never get too much boxing. So if you'd like to watch more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our Title Boxing YouTube page.